Hello, everyone. Got a few dirty jokes for you today.
So one day, Charlie Brown bought see-through pants thinking they were looking very cool. On his way to school, he met Lucy. "Hey, Lucy. Do you like my new pants? Aren't they cool?" Lucy replied, "Charlie Brown, I knew you were crazy, but now I can clearly see your nuts." So my daughter woke me up around midnight last night, tugged my arm and asked Daddy, "Do you know how old I'll be next month?" Tired as I was, I knew this was important to her, so I replied, "I don't know, sweetie." She just smiled and held up 4 fingers. It's now morning and we've been up all night. She still refuses to tell us where she got them. So I was sitting on a bench in the park next to a homeless man. I asked him how he ended up this way. He said, "Up until last week, I still had it all. A cook cooked my meals, my room was cleaned, my clothes were washed. I had a roof over my head. I had TV, internet. I went to the gym, the pool, the library. I could still go to school." I asked him, "What happened? Was it drugs? Alcohol? Divorce?" "Oh no, nothing like that," he said. "I got out of prison." So a preacher, wanting to raise money for his church, was told there was a fortune in horse racing. He decided to purchase a horse and enter it in the races. However, at the local auction, the going price for horses was so high that he settled on a donkey instead. The preacher figured, since he bought the animal, he might as well race it. To his great surprise, the donkey did quite well and came in 3rd place. The next day, the racing sheets carried this headline: "Preacher shows ass." The preacher was so pleased with the donkey that he entered it in the races again, and this time the animal won 1st place. The paper said, "Preacher's ass out in front." The bishop was so upset with this kind of publicity that he ordered the preacher not to enter the donkey in any more races. The newspaper printed this headline: "Bishop scratches preacher's ass." This was too much for the bishop, and he ordered the preacher to get rid of the donkey. The preacher decided to give the animal to a nun in a local convent. The next day, the headlines read, "Nun has best ass in town." The bishop fainted. When he came around, he informed the nun that she would have to dispose of the donkey. The nun searched and finally found a farmer willing to buy the animal for $10. The paper stated, "Nun peddles ass for $10. They buried the bishop the next day. So, a plane crashes on an island, and 2 guys survive. The island's native people approach them and say, "You can let us kill you now, or you can try to take the challenge. The challenge is, we get the strongest guy we have to flick you in the balls 10 times. The first guy thinks, that's got to be better than dying, and says, "I'll take the challenge." The natives get their strongest man to flick him 10 times in the balls. By the end of the challenge, the first survivor's balls are bleeding, and he's rolling on the ground in pain. The second guy sees this and thinks, "Holy shit, I would rather die than have my balls go through that kind of pain." So he says, "I think I'll just die." So, the natives flick him to death. So a guy goes to a government office to interview for a job. The interviewer asks him, "Are you a veteran?" "Yes, I served 2 tours in Vietnam," replied the guy. "Good, that counts in your favor. Do you have any service-related disabilities?" asked the interviewer. "I am 100% disabled," replied the guy. A mortar round blew off my testicles, so they declared me disabled. It doesn't affect my ability to work, though. Sorry to hear about the damage, said the interviewer, but I have some good news for you. I can hire you right now. Our working hours are 8 to 4. Come in at 10 tomorrow, and we'll get you started. If working hours are from 8 to 4, why do you want me to come at 10? Well, here at the government, we don't do anything but sit around and scratch our balls for the first 2 hours. No point in you coming in for that. Sitting in the bar, George asked his 40-year-old friend John, "How come you aren't married?" John, sipping on his drink, smirked and replied, "I haven't found the right woman yet." George asked, "So what are you looking for?" Leaning back in his chair, John began listing his criteria. "Oh, she's got to be real pretty, a good cook and housekeeper. She's got to know how to handle finances, have a nice and pleasant personality, and money. She's got to have money, and if she has her own house, it wouldn't hurt either." George, raising an eyebrow, remarked, "A woman like that would be crazy to marry you." Undeterred, John replied, "Oh, it's okay if she is crazy too." So a man walked into a liquor store with a sawn-off shotgun. He pointed the gun at the store assistant and told her to empty the cash register into the bag he was carrying. The assistant did so without any hesitation. The crook then told the assistant to give him a packet of cigarettes. The assistant calmly replied, "I'm sorry, sir. I can't serve you cigarettes unless you show me some ID." The crook pulled out his driver's license and showed it to the assistant. When the assistant saw that he was old enough for the cigarettes, she kindly gave him a packet. The crook then ran out the door. The assistant called the police straight away and gave them the crook's name and address that she had read off the license. Police attended the address and arrested the crook about half an hour later. So a leading local politician and member of the congregation was chosen to make the presentation and to give a little speech at the dinner. However, he was delayed, so the priest decided to say his own few words while they waited. "I got my first impression of the parish from the first confession I heard here. I thought I had been assigned to a terrible place. The very first person who entered my confessional told me he had stolen a television set and, when questioned by the police, was able to lie his way out of it. He had stolen money from his parents, embezzled from his employer, had an affair with his boss's wife, had sex with his boss's 17-year-old daughter on numerous occasions. He took illegal drugs, was arrested several times for public nudity, and gave AIDS to his sister-in-law. I was appalled that one person could do so many awful things. But as the days went on, I learned that my people were not all like that, and I had, indeed, come to a fine parish full of good and loving people." Just as the priest finished his talk, the politician arrived full of apologies at being late. He immediately began to make the presentation and gave his talk. "I'll never forget the first day our parish priest arrived," said the politician. "In fact, I had the honor of being the first person to go to him for confession." So a little boy got on the bus, sat next to a man reading a book, and noticed he had his collar on backwards. The little boy asked why he wore his collar that way. The man, who was a priest, said, "I am a father." The little boy replied, "My daddy doesn't wear his collar like that." The priest looked up from his book and answered, "I am the father of many." The boy said, "My dad has 4 boys, 4 girls, and 2 grandchildren, and he doesn't wear his collar that way." The priest, getting impatient, said, "I am the father of hundreds," and went back to reading his book. The little boy sat quietly, thinking for a while. then leaned over and said, "Maybe you should wear your pants backwards instead of your collar." So a highway patrolman waited outside a popular bar, hoping for a bust. Closing time, everyone came out, and he spotted his potential quarry. The man was so obviously inebriated that he could barely walk. He stumbled around the parking lot for a few minutes, looking for his car. After trying his keys on 5 other cars, he finally found his own vehicle. He sat in the car for a good 10 minutes as the other patrons left. He turned his lights on, then off, wipers on, then off. He started to pull forward into the grass, then stopped. Finally, when he was the last car, he pulled out onto the road and started to drive away. The patrolman, waiting for this, turned on his lights and pulled the man over. He administered the breathalyzer test, and to his great surprise, the man blew a 0.0. The patrolman was dumbfounded. "This equipment must be broken," he exclaimed. "I doubt it," said the man. "Tonight I am the designated decoy." So the train was quite crowded. So the U.S. Marine walked its entire length looking for a seat, but the only seat left was taken by a well-dressed, middle-aged French woman's poodle. The war-weary Marine asked, "Miss, may I have that seat?" The French woman just sniffed and said to no one in particular, "Americans are so rude. My little Fifi is using that seat." The Marine walked the entire train again, but the only seat left was under that dog. "Please, miss, may I sit down? I'm very tired," she snorted. "Not only are you Americans rude, you are also arrogant." This time, the Marine didn't say a word. He just picked up the little dog, tossed it out the train window, and sat down. The woman shrieked, "Someone must defend my honor. Put this American in his place." An English gentleman sitting nearby spoke up. "Sir, you Americans often seem to have a penchant for doing the wrong thing. You hold the fork in the wrong hand. You drive your autos on the wrong side of the road. And now, sir, you've thrown the wrong bitch out the window." So a guy goes into the doctor's and says, "Doctor, I have got 3 testicles. Does that make me a freak?" After a quick examination, the doctor says, "Wow, you do indeed have 3 testicles. And no, it doesn't make you a freak. It makes you a unique human being. Be proud of having them." The guy comes out of the doctor's feeling 10 feet tall and heads to the bus stop where another guy is waiting there. Not being able to resist, he says to the guy, "Do you know that between us, we have 5 balls?" The other guy says, "Why? Have you only got 1?" So George and Johnny were boarding a flight on Philippine Airlines, looking forward to their upcoming adventure. As they settled into their seats, George couldn't help but notice the incredible views from the window. However, just as the plane reached cruising altitude, there was a sudden jolt, followed by a loud noise. The plane began to shake violently, and the lights flickered on and off. George and Johnny looked at each other in terror, wondering what was happening. Then, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom. "Dear passengers, this is your captain speaking. We have encountered an unexpected problem with one of our engines. Please remain calm, as we are doing everything we can to ensure your safety." The plane continued to shake, and the passengers started to panic. George and Johnny tried to keep calm, but they could feel their hearts racing. Finally, the captain's voice came back on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an emergency landing on the water. Please follow the instructions of the crew and prepare for impact." As the plane hit the water, George and Johnny braced themselves for the worst. But to their surprise, The landing was smooth, and the plane came to a stop without incident. The captain's voice came on again. "Hello, passengers. We have successfully landed on the water. I hope all of you are fine. Now, all of the people who can swim, please go to the right side of the plane. The people who can't, please go to the left." Relieved, George turned to Johnny and said, "Wow, that was amazing. This airline really knows how to handle a crisis." Johnny nodded in agreement. "Yeah, I'm impressed. The crew seems really well trained." After everyone was arranged according to their swimming abilities, the captain spoke again. "Everyone who can swim and are on the right side of the plane, please evacuate the plane immediately and carefully. And to those on the left side of the plane, thank you for flying Philippine Airlines." So a couple was in a restaurant sitting at a table for two. Next table to them is a table for one, and there's a fella sitting at it who happens to be suffering from leprosy. When the couple's starter arrives, the guy looks across at the leper with a look of disgust on his face and pushes his uneaten starter away. The leper notices this and says, "I apologize. I know how bad I look, and I'm obviously turning you off your meal. I'll just go and not be any more trouble to you." The guy answers, "Not at all. It's not you, I promise. Not you at all. I'm sorry. Please sit down and finish your meal." Next, the main course arrives. The guy takes up his knife and fork and takes a piece of the steak he ordered. He raises it to his mouth and at the same time glances at the leper, slams it back onto the plate and pushes it away, and has to struggle to not throw up for a minute or two. The leper, embarrassed and self-conscious, stands up and says, "I'm really, really sorry, and I don't blame you at all. I should not have come here. I'm going to leave now. I've obviously ruined your evening, and your meal too." The guy says, "No, honestly, it's not you at all. Please sit down and finish your meal. It's not you at all, I swear to you." So the leper sits down again, and the couple's dessert arrives. He takes his spoon and scoops up a mouth-watering strawberry covered in ice cream from the bowl, raises it to his lips, glances at the leper, and again puts it back into the bowl with a look of disgust on his face, and again pushes the bowl away. The leper has had enough. He stands up and says, "Look, I can't help the way I am, but every time you look at me, the look of disgust on your face is obvious to me. I've ruined your meal, and I'm sorry. I'm going to leave now, and I will pay for your meal by way of an apology." The guy says, No, really, please, it's not you. Please sit down. I swear it's not you at all." The leper says, "You keep saying that, of course it's me. What else could it be?" Guy says, "It's not you. It's that fella behind you at the next table. He keeps dipping his bread in the back of your neck." So 4 university students partied too hard during a music festival and were unable to make it back for their final exam the next day. As they drove back to the university, they tried to think of a good excuse. Finally, they agreed to the same story, that a car tire was blown in the middle of nowhere at midnight, so they were stuck. They each sent the professor an email asking to retake the exam and gave the same excuse. The understanding professor said it was fine and asked them to take the exam the next day, but for fairness, they would have to take a different exam. The next day they came to the exam room, and as per the usual procedure, each obtained a copy of the exam and sat in a corner. The classroom was big and empty. The professor sat and watched them, so they were nervous. Fortunately, the questions on the first page are fairly easy. Even though these questions only worth 10 out of 100 points, it calmed them down a bit. So they quickly finished the first page at the same time and turned to the second page. There was a single question on it for 90 out of 100 points. Which tire was blown? So a weeping woman bursts into her hypnotherapist's office and declares, "Doctor, I have been faithful to my husband for 15 years, but yesterday I broke that trust and had an affair. The guilt is killing me. I just want to forget that it ever happened." The hypnotherapist just shakes his head, saying, "Not again." So I was in a public toilet and had just sat down when I heard a voice from the next cubicle. He said, "Hi, how are you?" Embarrassed, I said, "I'm doing fine." The voice asked, "So what are you up to?" I reply, "Just doing the same as you, sitting here." Again, the voice from next door called out, "Can I come over?" Annoyed, I replied, "I'm rather busy right now." The voice said, "Listen, I will have to call you back. There's an idiot next door answering all my questions." So Joe, a notoriously bad golfer, hits his ball off the first tee and watches as it slices to the right and disappears through an open window. Figuring that's the end of it, he gets another ball out of his bag and plays on. On the 8th hole, a police officer walks up to Joe on the course and says, "Did you hit a golf ball through a window back there?" Joe says, "Yes, I did." "Well," says the police officer, "it knocked a lamp over, scaring the dog, which raced out of the house onto the highway. A driver rammed into a brick wall to avoid the dog, sending 3 people to hospital. And it's all because you sliced the ball." "Oh my goodness," says Joe. "Is there anything I can do?" "Yes, there is," says the cop. "Try keeping your head down and close up your stance a bit." So, 2 vampire bats wake up in the middle of the night, thirsty for blood. One says, "Let's fly out of the cave and get some blood." "We're new here," says the second one. "It's dark out, and we don't know where to look. We'd better wait until the other bats go with us." The first bat replies, "Who needs them? I can find some blood somewhere." He flies out of the cave. When he returns, he's covered in blood. The second bat says excitedly, "Where did you get the blood?" The first bat takes his buddy to the mouth of the cave. Pointing into the night, he asks, "See that black building over there?" "Yes," the other bat answers. "Well," says the first bat glumly, "I didn't." So my friend thought I was lonely, so he set me up on a blind date with a beautiful girl from his work. She had long dark hair, amazing breasts that really complemented her hourglass waist and a peach of a booty. The date went amazing. We shared lots of different interests and got on really well. She told me early on that she found me attractive. After many drinks, we agreed to continue the conversation at my place, so I ordered a taxi and off we went. Few more glasses of wine, things moved to the bedroom. We were kissing on the bed, and my hands moved from her waist to her chest area. She grabbed my hand and suddenly looked nervous. "I have a confession to make," she said. "I actually only have really small boobs. I put socks in my bra to make them look bigger." I told her it wasn't a problem, but I also had a confession to make. "I'm sorry, but I also must confess I have baby-sized manhood," I told her, my voice full of shame. She put her hand on my mine and told me it was okay. We started kissing again. Then I slowly removed her dress. I took off her bra, and out popped the socks. She then pulled down my pants. Her eyes went wide with shock. The air left her body and she started to tremble. "You told me you had the pecker the size of a baby," she said, shaking. "I do," I replied, grabbing the monster. 8 pounds 4 ounces. So Mary approaches her mother, who is busy with housework, and asks if they could have a serious conversation. Her mother, concerned about her college-age daughter, stops what she's doing and invites her to sit down with her. They both settle down with a cup of coffee, and Mary looks visibly nervous. "What's on your mind, honey?" her mother asks, trying to put her daughter at ease. "You know you can tell me anything." Mary takes a deep breath before responding. "Mom, I have to tell you something, but please don't judge me and promise not to tell Dad." "Okay, I promise," her mother says, her voice reassuring. "What is it? Do you remember Jeremy, the neighbor I've been studying with?" Mary asks. Her mother nods. "And you know his dad, Robert?" "Yes," her mother says cautiously. "Well, I think I'm in love with him," Mary confesses, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother's expression turns from concern to shock. "What?" she exclaims. "Mary, that's not okay. Mom, you can't tell me who to love." Mary shoots back. "But he could be your father." Her mother retorts. "I don't care about the age difference," Mary insists. Her mother takes a deep breath, trying to process the situation. "I think you misunderstood me." So for 30 years, Johnson had arrived at work at 9 a.m. on the dot. He had never missed a day and was never late. Consequently, when on one particular day, 9 a.m. passed without Johnson's arrival, it caused a sensation. All work ceased, and the boss himself, looking at his watch and muttering, came out into the corridor. Finally, precisely at 10, Johnson showed up, clothes dusty and torn, his face scratched and bruised, his glasses bent. He limped painfully to the time clock, punched in, and said, aware that all eyes were upon him, "I tripped and rolled down 2 flights of stairs in the subway. I nearly died." And the boss said, "And to roll down 2 flights of stairs took you a whole hour?" So one evening, a man finds himself driving home from a wild and hilarious firefighter party. The party was so much fun that he had a few more drinks than he should have, making him a bit tipsy. Knowing that he needs to be cautious to avoid catching the attention of any vigilant police officers, he decides to drive extra carefully. However, despite his efforts, luck is not on his side, and he ends up running into a police patrol. The flashing lights of the patrol car illuminate the road, causing the man's heart to race as he prepares to face the consequences of his intoxicated state. The police officer steps out of the car and approaches the man, asking sternly, "And where do you come from?" Realizing that honesty may be his best option, the man replies, "I'm driving home from a firefighter party." "Yes, I must admit, I'm a little loaded, and I apologize for any inconvenience caused." The policeman interrupts him with a friendly smile, saying, I know, my friend. I've been to a few of those parties myself. Tell you what, just give me 2 cigarettes, and I haven't seen you tonight." Relieved and grateful for the officer's understanding, the man reaches into his pocket and hands the cop 2 cigarettes, thanking him for his leniency. With a nod, the policeman allows him to continue on his way. Feeling a mixture of relief and caution, the man resumes his journey, driving attentively and hoping to reach home without any further encounters. However, fate has other plans for him. Just 10 minutes later, he finds himself face to face with another police patrol, his heart sinking at the sight. The second policeman steps out of the car, mirroring the previous officer's inquisitive gaze, and asks, "And where do you come from?" Taking a deep breath, the man responds, "I'm driving home from a firefighter party." "Yes," I admit, "I've had a few drinks, and I apologize for any inconvenience caused." Like déjà vu, the policeman interrupts him with a knowing smile, saying, I know, my friend. I've attended a few of those parties myself. Give me 2 cigarettes, and I haven't seen you tonight." Slightly astonished, but relieved that his story seems to be working, the man reaches into his pocket and hands the officer 2 cigarettes, expressing his gratitude for the officer's understanding. With a friendly pat on the back, the policeman allows him to continue his journey. Feeling a mixture of disbelief and amusement, the man wonders if lightning can strike twice. However, just as he starts to relax, his heart skips a beat as he finds himself encountering yet another police patrol. This time, it's the 3rd and final patrol he encounters that night. The 3rd policeman steps out of the car, wearing a curious expression on his face, and asks, "And where do you come from?" With a sigh, the man replies, "I'm driving home from a firefighter party." "Yes, I must admit, I'm a bit loaded, and I apologize for any inconvenience caused." Before he can finish his sentence, the policeman interrupts him, wearing a wide grin, and says, I know, my friend. I'm quite fond of those parties myself. Just give me 2 cigarettes, and I haven't seen you tonight." The man, feeling a mix of relief and frustration, responds, "I'm sorry, officer, but your colleague took the last 2 cigarettes I had." Amused by the unexpected twist, the policeman chuckles and says, "Well, then it's about time you get out of the roundabout and drive home." So Harry was at work one day, just sitting in his cubicle on the 3rd floor. He was upset because he'd worked there for about 15 years, but had never gotten a vacation. "I've worked for this damn company for 15 years. God knows how many hours I've wasted here, and they don't even have the decency to thank me with a vacation. Well, I'll tell ya, I've had enough. I'm going to go give Mr. Johnston a piece of my mind, and if he doesn't like it, I'm out of here," he tells his cubicle mate. He gets up and marches up 4 flights of stairs, kicks his boss's door in, and slams it shut behind him. "Listen, Mr. Johnston, I've given you 15 years of my damn life, and not once have you given me a vacation. I'm sure all the other drones down in the pit are happy just having a job in this economy, but not me. If you don't give me a vacation, I'm out of here." Mr. Johnston looks at him, at first appalled that someone would just barge into his office like that, but then he began to ponder. "You know something," Mr. Johnston said. "You're right. You've been one of our best and most loyal employees for a long time. I'm sorry. I hadn't realized that you've been passed over for a vacation." He tilts his head, contemplating. "I'll tell you what. If it means this much to you, I'll grant you vacation time, effective immediately, if and only if you agree to go where I say." Harry is a little surprised, as he didn't actually think this plan would work. "Sure. Where am I going?" "Mr." Johnston takes out a yellow post-it, writes something down, folds it in half, and slides it across his desk. "I've written down my favorite hotel. The wife and I go every year in the spring. I know it's not spring now, but it's down south, so it'll still be nice. I'll go ahead and call the airport and have your ticket waiting. You just have to leave immediately." Harry, having never really gotten a vacation before, was ecstatic. "Absolutely. I'll see you when I get back, sir." "Thank you." Harry heads back down to his cubicle, practically dancing with excitement. "How'd the meeting go? Do you still have a job?" his cubicle mate asks. "I sure do. He's sending me to his favorite hotel, effective immediately," he said. "Fantastic. Where are you going?" Harry opens the post-it and says, It's someplace called the Lost Taco Hotel." "The Lost Taco Hotel. The entire floor of cubicle workers erupt, grab him, and throw him out the window. Luckily for Harry, that side of the building has a lot of trees and bushes and whatnot, which broke his fall. What in the world? Harry ponders as he picks himself up and dusts off his pants. Oh well, whatever. I'm on vacation. He hails a taxi, and off to the airport he goes. As they are making their way to the airport, he and the taxi driver get to talking, mostly small talk to pass the time. About halfway through the trip, the taxi driver asks him why he's going to the airport. Well, since you asked, my boss is sending me on a vacation, 15 years of employment, and this is the first one he's given me. I told my fellow workers, and I guess they're jealous, because they threw me right out the window when I told them. Well, that's a bit extreme, the driver said. Where are you going? He's sending me to his favorite hotel. It's called the Lost Taco Hotel. The Lost Taco Hotel? The driver pulls over immediately in the middle of a very busy interstate highway, forcefully pulls him out of his taxi, and drives off, not even bothering to collect the fare. What the hell is going on here? Harry wonders. He realizes he's pretty close to the airport, so he walks the rest of the way. He eventually arrives at the airport, gets his ticket, and boards the plane. It starts to fill up, and a lovely young lady winds up sitting in the seat next to him. Well, well, well. Looks like my day is starting to pick up. Harry thinks to himself. The plane eventually takes off, and after about 20 minutes or so, he and the young lady begin conversing. She tells him about how she's off to visit family that she hasn't seen in a while, about her cute little puppy she's leaving behind, just your typical small talk. She eventually asks, "So, why are you flying down south?" Harry, understandably at this point, is a little reluctant. Well, after 15 years of employment, my boss is finally giving me a vacation. That's wonderful, she says. Where are you going? Harry sighs and says, the Lost Taco Hotel. The Lost Taco Hotel? The entire plane, passengers, flight attendants, and even the pilots grab him, open up the emergency exit door, and throw him out of an airplane in mid-flight. Luckily, they were flying over a large lake, and Harry landed in the middle of it. As he surfaced, he saw a fisherman in a boat speeding up to him. Holy Toledo. Are you okay? You just fell right out of the sky. Get on in this boat. Yeah, I think I'm fine, Harry says as he climbs in. This has just been the weirdest day. First, I get sent on my first vacation in 15 years by my boss. Then I get thrown out of a window in the building I work in, thrown out of a cab on my way to the airport, and then thrown out of the airplane. I just don't understand why everyone freaks out when I tell them that I'm going to the Lost Taco Hotel. The Lost Taco Hotel? The fisherman stands up very quickly, which causes the boat to tip over, trapping them both underneath, and they both drown. The moral of the story: never stand up in boats. So an airplane is about to crash when a female passenger jumps up frantically and announces, "If this is how it's going to end, I want it to be feeling like a woman." She removes all her clothing and asks, "Is there someone on this plane who is man enough to make me feel like a woman?" A man stands up, removes his shirt, and says, "Here, iron this." So a police officer stopped a motorist who was speeding down Main Street. "But officer," the man began, "I can explain. Just be quiet. I'm going to let you cool your heels in jail until the chief gets back." "But, officer, I just wanted to say," and I said to keep quiet, "you're going to jail." A few hours later, the officer looked in on his prisoner and said, "Lucky for you that the chief said his daughter's wedding he'll be in a good mood when he gets back." "Don't count on it," answered the fellow in the cell. "I'm the groom." So the local church is doing a Riverside Baptism. There is a pretty long line of people waiting to be baptized by the river. A wandering drunk man sees the line, doesn't know what's going on, but decides to join in. When it's the drunk man's turn, he goes into the river and the preacher grabs him, holds his nose, takes him under the water, brings him back up, and says to the drunk man, "Have you found Jesus?" Drunk man says, "No." The preacher gets a puzzled look on his face, grabs the drunk man, and takes him under again, holding him down for a few more seconds. He brings him back up and says a little more forcefully, "Have you found Jesus?" Drunk man says, "Nope." The preacher is really flustered now, grabs the drunk and really pulls him under the water, keeping him under for a long time. Finally, he pulls him up and screams at the drunk, "Have you found Jesus?" The drunk man, spitting and sputtering, gasping for air, and when he gets his breath, replies to the preacher, "Are you sure this is where he fell in?" So a young single guy is on a cruise ship, having the time of his life. On the second day of the cruise, the ship slams into an iceberg and begins to sink. Passengers around him are screaming, flailing, and drowning, but our guy manages to grab onto a piece of driftwood and, using every last ounce of strength, swims a few miles through the shark-infested sea to a remote island. Sprawled on the shore, nearly passed out from exhaustion, he turns his head and sees a woman lying near him, unconscious, barely breathing. She's also managed to wash up on shore from the sinking ship. He makes his way to her, and with some mouth-to-mouth assistance, he manages to get her breathing again. She looks up at him, wide-eyed and grateful, and says, "My God, you saved my life." He suddenly realizes the woman is Cindy Crawford. Days and weeks go by. Cindy and our guy are living on the island together. They've set up a hut. There's fruit on the trees, and they're in heaven. Cindy's fallen madly in love with our man, and they're making passionate love morning, noon, and night. Alas, one day she notices he's looking kind of glum. "What's the matter, sweetheart?" she asks. "We have a wonderful life together. I'm in love with you. Is there something wrong? Is there anything I can do?" He says, "Actually, Cindy, there is. Would you mind putting on my shirt?" "Sure," she says, "if it will help." He takes off his shirt, and she puts it on. "Now, would you put on my pants?" he asks. "Sure, honey, if it's really going to make you feel better," she says. "Okay, would you put on my hat now, and draw a little mustache on your face?" He asks. "Whatever you want, sweetie," she says, and does. Then he says, "Now, would you start walking around the edge of the island?" She starts walking around the perimeter of the island. He sets off in the other direction. They meet up halfway around the island a few minutes later. He rushes up to her, grabs her by the shoulders, and says, "Dude, you'll never believe who I'm sleeping with." So a very shy guy goes into a bar and sees a beautiful woman sitting at the bar. After an hour of gathering up his courage, he finally goes over to her and asks, tentatively, "Would you mind if I chatted with you for a while?" She responds by yelling, at the top of her lungs, "No, I won't sleep with you tonight." Everyone in the bar is now staring at them. Naturally, the guy is hopelessly and completely embarrassed, and he slinks back to his table. After a few minutes, the woman walks over to him and apologizes. She smiles at him and says, "I'm sorry if I embarrassed you. You see, I'm a graduate student in psychology, and I'm studying how people respond to embarrassing situations. To which he responds, at the top of his lungs, "What do you mean, $200? So there was once a small town experiencing an overpopulation of squirrels. The Presbyterian Church called a meeting to decide what to do about their squirrel infestation. After much prayer and consideration, they concluded that the squirrels were predestined to be there, and they should not interfere with God's divine will. At the Baptist church, the squirrels had taken an interest in the baptistry. The deacons met and decided to put a water slide on the baptistry and let the squirrels drown themselves. The squirrels liked to slide and, unfortunately, knew instinctively how to swim, so twice as many squirrels showed up the following week. The Lutheran Church decided that they were not in a position to harm any of God's creatures. So, they humanely trapped their squirrels and set them free near the Baptist church. 2 weeks later, the squirrels were back when the Baptists took down the water slide. The Episcopalians tried a much more unique path by setting out pans of whiskey around their church in an effort to kill the squirrels with alcohol poisoning. They sadly learned how much damage a band of drunk squirrels can do. But the Catholic Church came up with a more creative strategy. They actually baptized all the squirrels and made them members of the church. Now, they only see them at Christmas and Easter. Not much was heard from the Jewish synagogue. They took the first squirrel and circumcised him. They haven't seen a squirrel since. So a mother was walking down the hall when she heard a humming sound coming from her daughter's bedroom. When she opened the door, she found her daughter naked on the bed with a vibrator. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed. The daughter replied, "I'm 35 and still living at home with my parents, and this is the closest I'll ever get to a husband." Later that week, the father was in the kitchen and heard a humming sound coming from the basement. When he went downstairs, he found his daughter naked on the sofa with her vibrator. "What are you doing?" he exclaimed. The daughter replied, "I'm 35 and still living at home with my parents, and this is the closest I'll ever get to a husband." A couple of days later, the mother heard the humming sound again, this time in the living room. In there, she found her husband watching the Super Bowl on television with the vibrator buzzing away beside him. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed. He replied, "Watching the game with my son-in-law." So, Tim decided to tie the knot with his longtime girlfriend. One evening, after the honeymoon, he was organizing his golfing equipment. His wife was standing nearby, watching him. After a long period of silence, she finally speaks. "Tim, I've been thinking, now that we're married, maybe it's time you quit golfing. You spend so much time on the course. You could probably get a good price for your clubs." Tim gets this horrified look on his face. She says, "Darling, what's wrong?" Tim replied, "For a minute there, you were beginning to sound like my ex-wife." "Ex-wife?" she screams. "I didn't know you were married before." "I wasn't," he replied. So Mike Murphy and his pregnant wife live on a farm in the distant rural regions. No running water, no electricity, etc. One night, Mike's wife begins to deliver the baby. The local doctor is there in attendance. "What do you want me to do, doctor?" "Hold the lantern, Mikey. Here it comes." The doctor delivers the child and holds it up for the proud father to see. "Mike, you're the proud father of a fine, strapping boy." Saints be praised. Before Mike can finish, the doctor interrupts. "Wait a minute. Hold the lantern, Mikey." Soon, the doctor delivers the next child. You've a full set now, Mikey. A beautiful baby daughter. Again, the doctor cuts in. Hold the lantern, Mikey. Hold the lantern. Soon, the doctor delivers a third child. The doctor holds up the baby for Mike's inspection. Doctor, asks Mike, do you think it's the light that's attracting them? So a man walks into a bar and orders 3 shots of whiskey. He downs them quickly. What's the occasion? Asks the bartender. I just had my first blowjob. Well, that is a special occasion, replied the bartender. Have another shot on the house. No thanks, replied the man. If 3 didn't get the taste out of my mouth, I doubt another one will. So, an Englishman, a Frenchman, a nun, and a young woman are sitting in a train compartment. The train drives into a tunnel. The lights in the compartment have gone out. It is pitch black. Suddenly, a loud smack is heard, and when the train is back out of the tunnel, the Frenchman is in pain, holding his red cheek. The nun thinks, he must have groped the young woman and she slapped him very good. The young woman thinks, haha, he must have tried to grope me, but in the dark touched the nun and she smacked him very good. The Frenchman thinks, what a crap. The Englishman must have tried to grope the young woman. She thought it was me and smacked me. The Englishman thinks, in the next tunnel, I'll hit him again. So a little boy boards a public bus and sits down right behind the driver. He begins to speak. If my mom was a cow and my dad was a bull, I'd be a little calf. If my mom was a hen and my dad was a chicken, I'd be a little chick. If my mom was a deer and my dad was a buck, I'd be a little deer. If my mom was a duck and my dad was a goose, I'd be a little duckling. After listening to the boy rambling on and on in the same manner for a while, the bus driver begins to get annoyed. He turns around and says to the boy, "What if your mom was a drunk and your dad was a bum?" In an instant, the boy responds, "I'd be a bus driver." So a patient who needs a heart transplant suddenly gets a phone call from his surgeon. "You are in luck. We have 2 matching donors, a 20-year-old athlete and an 80-year-old lawyer. Which heart do you want?" The patient answers, "Give me the lawyer's heart." "Are you sure?" asks the surgeon in surprise. "Yeah, I'd rather have one that hasn't been used." So the Finnish president was planning a visit to a border town in the Soviet Union. The local commissar, hoping to impress the Finns, decided to visit a local school. In preparation, he had all the children learn new songs, march in formation, wear their best uniforms, etc. Propaganda at its finest. The big day arrived, and the commissar stood before the students and loudly asked, "Who has the best schools in the world?" To which the student replied, "The Soviet Union." He asked again, "Who has the best playgrounds and candies in the world?" Again, the students shouted, "The Soviet Union." This went on for about half an hour when the Finnish president heard a little boy crying. He asked him, "What's the matter, child? Why are you crying?" The boy replied, "Because I want to go to the Soviet Union." So a young boy enters a barber shop, and the barber whispers to his customer, "This is the dumbest kid in the world. Watch while I prove it to you." The barber puts a dollar bill in one hand and 2 quarters in the other, then calls the boy over and asks, "Which do you want, son?" The boy takes the quarters and leaves. "What did I tell you?" said the barber. "That kid never learns." Later, when the customer leaves, he sees the same young boy coming out of the ice cream parlor. "Hey, son, may I ask you a question?" "Why did you take the quarters instead of the dollar bill?" The boy licked his cone and replied, "Because the day I take the dollar, the game is over."